Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm being joined once more by actress Ellen Geer, who has joined me to talk about her own career and her life and the life and career of her famous father, Will Geer. Welcome back, Ellen. So what was it like growing up with Will Geer as a father? What's, as a family, as, adventures,
He was an adventure. I remember when my sister, got to that teenage age where, the parents, oh my God. And of course we would go, they went to pick her up one time at high school and Katie she pretended that he wasn't her father because he was in his raggedy old clothes that, that was Pop. It was interesting during the teenage times. He was to me he was a great father. I learned about survival from him and how to treat people and how not to treat people, and everything about him was top notch for me.
So would you feel it was sort of an unconventional?
Oh God, yes. Yes, they used to call him the oldest living hippie, Maybe you knew about that in the Waltons. Yeah. He would he would come in his overalls and he would bring vegetables when he was on Broadway, and people would, because we lived out in a farm then, when he was doing Broadway prior to Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know he put together the garden on the studio lot that was the Walton garden, and tended that.
And that was something that even when we were on tour, I did a lot of years of rep with him on tour, at APA and the different kind of classical theaters, and we would always build a garden wherever we went. A Shakespeare garden, where you take the quotes of Shakespeare and you put them next to the plants, and it was good. We have one here at Theatricum. We have a Shakespeare garden here.
Yeah, and you fortunately just explained what it was, because I will say there's a Shakespeare garden, and people will say, well, what's a Shakespeare garden?
Well, I found it so. For instance, the columbine. People don't realize the columbine back in the 1600s. They take columbine, which is a flower, and they would put it on paths, and it was to keep the dogs from barking. Or they would put, say the marigold that goes to bed with the sun and with him rises weeping. Then we would have the marigold in that day. It was a calendula. They didn't have marigolds, or have all been, changed. But it was the original marigold is the calendula. And all this is in this book that he wrote about Shakespeare on plants. It's wonderful study. I remember when, say, I was having a hard time in life, I would go to him, crying, saying, I don't know what to do. And he would say, well, you go read Shakespeare and you'll never have to go to a psychiatrist, honey. And it's true. Whenever I have troubles, I read Shakespeare. It's cheaper.
Did you always want to be an actor? It's kind of the family business, it seems.
Yeah, it's a family business. My brother, my sister, and now we're the fourth generation. My granddaughter just did Wendy and Peter Pan last year, and the little boys played the two young sons, and we seem to love it, and also what we love is passing on what we know. We don't hoard things. We pass on what we know, and people can either take it or not take it, but it's a good environment for young people to be outside and doing theater, and it's good.
Yeah, and you do all summer programs.
We have summer camps. We start them. My favorite class is when we start them, when they're just knee-high to grasshoppers. They started, my youngest grandchild started at 3 years old. And we have it, and it goes to about 6. And they, to hear them reciting Shakespeare and learning where he lived, and it's wonderful. They all love it.
Yeah.
They love it.
So did you, beyond the theater and the family and stuff, outside of that specifically study acting at all, or was Will one of your teachers, or how did, or
Oh
was
yeah,
it just
you learn from
organic?
top through osmosis, you know. Uh, but yeah, I left high school and went to Stratford, Connecticut, and they had a little school there. That's how I spent my last year of high school, was doing that, and then just started to work. During that period, actors were able to make a living in theater. You know, I got my union card when I was 15 and just went to work. And
Mm.
that was good. But so it's very hard for the young. Most of the actors out here in LA come to make money, of course, in films, because it's very hard to make money in theater, you know, in today's world. You know, unless you're a star or something like that, it's hard. So
Yeah.
hard. But it's so important. Theater is so important, especially now, because it's visceral. It's there. You're sitting next to a stranger. You're living and breathing together a story, and you're reacting. You know, that's just, especially today with the digital world, it's so important for young people to go to the theater.
Yeah, to have that interactive experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What would you say in terms of Will? Like, so his favorite things were kind of being in nature and
Yeah,
working with the theater and
yeah, yeah.
people and
Yeah, and he loved Mama. He just loved him because they both had the same energy and sunshine. They were our sunshine. Anything that, you know, when he was going to the court to be investigated, you know, I remember, you know, he had on a plaid shirt and in a striped tie. And, oh, you can't do that. But Herder, we're here, and it's cherry blossom time. We're going to be able, you know, it was this positive attitude about everything that he had, and that's what made him such a delight to be around.
yeah. Well, I always felt like even though he was gone too soon, I felt like
Yeah,
he
there was those strawberry shortcakes
oh,
at the farmer's market.
too many of them. I didn't necessarily feel like he took care of his health,
You
but he
know,
lived life, and I felt like any place I ever went, if I was traveling, doing work or doing interviews for the Waltons or whatever, pretty much any reporter, whoever did an interview on me, said, "Oh, Will Geer was here. I interviewed him." I mean, he was everywhere.
I know.
And I feel like he just so lived life to the fullest that those cliches of when you lose someone, where you say, well, they lived a very full
Yeah,
life. I think that's more true of him than
so
almost
many.
anyone I know.
That's nice. He loved doing the Waltons. He really did. It gave him a security that he hadn't had for 10 years, and it was wonderful, wonderful.
What what sort of things did he say about us? It was interesting because
How
as a
about you?
teenager, like I was 14 years old when I started
Right.
working with Will, and as a teenager, he was a little bit of an oddity to me. I
Yes,
didn't quite know what to make of him
I know.
as
Of
a
course not.
teenager who grew up in LA and was sort of
I
I was like, who is this person? Because people always say, oh, well, was he like a grandfather to you? And I'm like, no. I'm
know.
like,
No,
who is this like, original hippie? And
I know. That's right. I know well, you know, you have to think of where his background, where he came from, what he'd been through as a human being. You know, I mean, he never fought in the army because he was in between the wars, and what he loved to do was to make victory gardens during the war. You know, and I love some of his testimony that he had. You know, he used to say, first of all, one of the interviewers during the HUAC, you know, didn't know who Moliere was, which was quite startled my father. And then at one point it was dragging on. He said, you know, you are keeping me from spring planting. And which I loved for him to be saying in the courtroom in Washington, D.C. And he said, you know, we all have to be in a turkey once in a while. And he was referring to the investigation. I just love the way He was, and how he faced a dilemma.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So did he talk much about us, the kids, the cast,
He loved the Waltons, and yeah, it was a special time to him because it was his period. He understood the period probably better than any of you guys, and he was a resource for the writer, and that's what he is. He was a real. I mean, he was a real American, an honest, root-bound American. He was a Hoosier, if you met any of his family, they're all country people. They were of the earth, and yeah, he loved the Waltons. He loved all you guys. He just adored you. He really did. He loved being able to sit at the table with you. He loved to tease you.
Did you?
And especially loved Ellen Corby, who, after Pop died, she would come up to the theater, and it was after her stroke, she would lean down into her cast, and she'd pull out $50 and give it to us every time she came. She was so dear to us, Ellen.
Yeah, they were so wonderful together as those characters.
Yes, those characters. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can just imagine you at 14 meeting him for the first. That's what happened to my sister when she was going to high school. Don't come here. Sometimes he'd come in, just his underwear. It's just because that's what he was working in out at the garden. Life was just, it wasn't precious. And in that period in the 50s, you walk into a home, the first thing that would happen they would offer you a drink. Everybody had a bar. We didn't do that, I think maybe the first thing you were offered were some carrots he pulled out of the ground, It's just very different background than what a lot of kids had in the structured 50s.
Yeah. Now we know that obviously he was very close with Woody Guthrie and I believe Pete Seeger, who were sort of some of the other that you remember him sort of hanging with. Who were the interesting?
Well, Bess Hawes. They were, all the folk world. He loved. It was very important for him to do union things, and he'd go and he'd do his Walt Whitman, his Mark Twain at unions that would help, give people courage. I mean, I was brought up on the back of a truck ramp singing songs, and that's what we did. We went to inspire people to fight against oppression. That was our job. That's the way Pop was.
Did he cross paths with John Steinbeck at all?
Oh yeah, we had John Steinbeck out. Yeah, he did, absolutely. Yeah, no, he met everybody. I can't keep up with who Papa knew.
Well, and you were young, so they might have been.
At one time, I was at some party. It was some party we're at a theater thing at ACT, American Conservative Theater, out of New York and San Francisco. And suddenly he patted me and said, "This is your brother, Ellen." And there was this tall, very conservative gentleman, and the other one's over there. And I thought, what is this secret? But he'd had a girlfriend named Rose who killed herself by sticking her head in the oven. And these were two sons that he helped through that period. They weren't married, they weren't his sons, but he included them. He did it again later with somebody who there were two children, Raleigh and Vincent, three actually, and he just was able to bring people in who needed help, young people especially. One story I'll leave you with is, he said, "We're going to build a garden today." Ellen, it was in Bridgeport. We were doing Shakespeare in Connecticut. And okay. I said, "We're going to have a stream of watermelon here, which will make the big leaves garden. And then the daffodils along on this side and the hyacinths over there. And then we'll keep the acacia a little bit farther out, but the yellow will be..." He had this whole speech about what it was going to look like. I couldn't keep up. And I would put them in, all the bulbs and the plants that we were going to do. And, you'd go back a couple months later, and there it was, just what he was talking about. It was a vision that he saw of how it would look. And it did. It was so beautiful. He was a real natural gardener.
Yeah. Well, I know that we are part of the reason why I finally, because I've been wanting to do this with you. I mean, you yourself have had a tremendous career, and I'm always watching something. Oh, there's Ellen,
and that career, the TV career, was what helped support this and helped keep this going. It was very important. I am thankful to Hollywood, thankful to have that happen.
I mean, you've worked with some tremendous people, and as did Will, and yet I never think of either of you as Hollywood. That you have, I'm sure, big stars, that are friends, and yet there's nothing pretentious about you or Will or the family. They're just other people.
That's really a beautiful thing to say to us as a family.
I think of you as a person and a wonderful, gifted actress. I mean, I watch you and I go, your work is just always simple in the sense that it's real. I always gauge things by, do I catch the person acting?
Yeah, right.
Do I see the work? Do I see the homework?
See the work, see the techniques,
And it's just never the case.
That's a beautiful compliment.
When I would do scenes with you, I'd feel like I needed to up my game. It's like, oh, she's so good. How can I?
Shakespearean actress.
Well, Shakespeare's always intimidated me because I didn't come up with it. I never really did it, and so I'm good at learning lines, but I've never really done Shakespeare, except Will took the kids to the Hollywood Bowl for a benefit that was being done, and he was asked to perform, and he took all of us along with, and gave us that opportunity to do Shakespeare at the Hollywood Bowl. Something that
I bet you guys are wonderful.
But he made us feel like whatever we did was going to be perfect. It was never any judge. It was just go do it, have fun with it. Don't treat it too precious. Just
that's right.
And that to me embodies the work that I see you do, and that.
Oh, thank you.
You're just a journeyman actor that's had this wonderful, prolific career, and I was looking over some of your credits, and big films and recurring things in TV series, and of course, a guest spot on everything, every TV show of the day. I mean, you're a prominent actress in this community.
Well, thank you.
I
love working, don't you? I just love working.
I do too. And I think it's one of the toughest things about this profession. And obviously you grew up with that, when what you love to do is not something you get to do all the time, that you're allowed to do. You're always, it's easier. You have the theater, so you can kind of go, great, I'm going to go
theater. Because, when COVID hit and suddenly the theaters were closing down, I said, no, don't close down. Just go find a park. Go ahead and do it in the park. Do it anywhere. Don't tell me theater is dead, because people have to get together and perform. And it doesn't matter at what quality. I know when we first started Theatricum, there was all this worry about critics. And it doesn't matter what the critics say. It matters about the people that are sitting there observing a story that might make them think about themselves, might make them want to change something, might want to make them happy because they're that way too. There's so much goes on in theater that you don't get in film. You can't, because film is wonderful, but it selects for you. And it'll add music when you're supposed to feel something maybe you don't feel. It has a much more controlling, and I love film. I absolutely adore it. But there's the rawness of theater and the experience of viewing something with a group of people. You can't replace it. Replace it.
I agree. Yeah. The value of the arts, particularly in today's society, I think cannot be overstated.
Oh, kids need it so much. Kids. Yeah, that's what's going to make. That's
So
what's.
what would you recommend to young people who want to pursue the arts? What advice do you give them?
Well, there are many theater places where they can learn if they've got a parent who will take the time to get them there. It's as important as music. Learn. What was it Pop used to say? You gotta sing, dance, and play an instrument. That was pounded into our heads. I play about 5 or 6 different instruments. I sing. Doesn't matter if it's great or not. I sing and act, and it gets you through. It gets you through everything in life, and kids need to be exposed to it, even if they become business people, even if they become scientists or archaeologists. It doesn't matter what you become, but to have that teamwork, it's almost like, when boys go into football and all that sort of stuff, can be dangerous to their bodies, but it's working in a team. You can't judge when you're working in theater. You have to just be in it and work at it, and that's what makes a good, solid team. They learn so much in theater if they get involved in a camp or something.
I didn't know
Will. Human being.
Will. So what instruments did Will play?
Papa didn't. He didn't even ride a horse. I remember. I remember he was doing something with Dean Martin, and I can't remember who, and he couldn't make the horse stop, so they put the heavy string of a piano, a couple of strings in order to make the horse stop. He never drove. My poor.
Did he ever learn, or he just chose not to? Did he never learn, or he just chose?
He just never learned. It was his voice and his acting and his gardening. That was Pop. But he encouraged everybody. Yeah. I mean, he encouraged Pete Seeger. He encouraged, he brought Woody from, out to New York so he could hit the big time, and yeah. It's
a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to thank Ellen once again for joining me, and I will see you next time for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.